My son, Michael, didn't just steal money from my company. He stole my entire identity, my legacy, and left me with nothing but a name synonymous with ruin. But what he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that a broken woman can still possess a mind sharper than any blade, and I was about to prove it to them all. They thought I was down and out, just a waitress, a ghost of my former self, but they had no idea the inferno they had unwittingly ignited. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is, where you are now. Your support means the world, and I truly appreciate you being here to listen to my story. For over 40 years, the name Catherine Wells had been etched into the bedrock of Chicago's financial consulting world. Wells & Associates wasn't just a firm. It was a testament to decades of relentless work, ethical dealings, and a client-first philosophy that had built fortunes and saved legacies. I had poured my entire life into that company, building it from a small, two-person operation into a bustling enterprise that occupied the entire 20th floor of the prestigious Blackwell Tower. Every client, every success, every late night spent poring over ledgers, it all culminated in a life of quiet dignity, professional respect, and the comfortable knowledge that I had built something real, something that would last. My beautiful studio apartment overlooked Lake Michigan, my weekends were spent volunteering at the local animal shelter, and my only worry was whether my hydrangeas would bloom properly that year. I never married again after my husband passed, pouring all my nurturing energy into my work and, of course, into my son Michael. He was my only child, my flesh and blood, and I had dreams for him to one day take over the firm, to carry on the Wells name with the same integrity. I put him through the best schools, gave him every opportunity, taught him everything I knew about finance, about trust, about doing right by people. He started working at Wells & Associates right out of business school, and for years he seemed to thrive, learning the ropes, impressing clients, showing real promise. I was so proud, so incredibly, devastatingly proud. Then came the day the world cracked open. The FBI. The forged documents. The missing $2, $7 million. Siphoned from client accounts, my signature meticulously replicated, indistinguishable from my own. Michael, my son. He confessed. He had committed financial fraud, a desperate, greedy act that not only destroyed our clients' trust, but ripped the very foundation out from under Wells & Associates. The firm collapsed overnight. My professional license, though not fully revoked, was suspended, my reputation shattered, my life's work in ashes. I lost everything: the company, the prestige, my financial stability, and most agonizingly, the dream I had for my son. At 68 years old, I found myself adrift, swimming in a sea of shame and despair. I sold my beloved apartment, liquidated what little savings I had left after restitution, and moved into a cramped, dusty studio on the wrong side of town. The phone stopped ringing. Old friends crossed the street to avoid me. The silence was deafening. But I still had bills to pay, still had to eat, so I swallowed my pride, walked into Murphy's Diner, a greasy spoon I used to drive past on my way to work, and asked for a job. Tommy Murphy, a kind man with a permanent scent of fried onions and coffee, didn't ask questions. He just gave me an apron and a tray, and for 2 years, Catherine Wells, once a doyenne of finance, became Catherine, the diner waitress. My days were a monotonous blur of refilling coffee cups, wiping down counters, and trying to forget who I once was. The shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. One blustery Tuesday morning, the usual cacophony of clattering plates and mumbled orders at Murphy's was punctuated by a booming, arrogant voice. Harrison Blackwell. Even though I was living in a different world now, his name was still whispered with a mix of awe and trepidation in Chicago's business circles. A self-made titan, owner of the very Blackwell Tower where my office used to be. He strode in, all designer suit and self-importance, found an empty booth, and proceeded to conduct a very loud, very public business call, oblivious to the fact that his voice carried through the small diner like a megaphone. As I approached with his coffee, His table was littered with scattered papers, financial statements, and printouts. He was on the phone, yelling about leverage, cash flow, distressed assets. My eyes, even after 2 years of focusing on ketchup stains and sugar packets, couldn't help but dart over the documents. It was an instinct, a muscle memory I thought had withered. What I saw, a jumble of figures and projections, sent a cold jolt down my spine. The patterns, the ratios, the cash flow indicators, they screamed danger, a familiar siren song of impending disaster. He was speaking to someone, dismissing their concerns, boasting about some Miami real estate play that was clearly bleeding him dry. My mind, rusty but still sharp, began to connect the dots. His bluster was a thin veneer over a very deep financial hole. I refilled his coffee, my hands steady despite the tremors of recognition I felt inside. He barked into his phone. "This call alone is worth more than your entire annual income, pal." He slammed the phone down, then glanced up at me, a dismissive sneer on his face. "More coffee, waitress." I hesitated, a lifetime of professional ethics warring with 2 years of learned humility. The old Catherine Wells, the one who didn't back down, won. "Mr. Blackwell," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help but notice some of the documents on your table. Your company, Blackwell Enterprises, is heading for bankruptcy." His jaw dropped, not in shock, but in furious disbelief. "What did you just say?" he thundered, his face reddening. "Financial advice, waitress? Are you out of your mind? Do you know who I am?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I know enough to tell you that your leverage patterns are unsustainable, your cash flow is critical, and whatever Miami real estate play you're involved in, it's a catastrophic bleed. Unless you make drastic changes, and fast, you'll be out of business within 6 months." He scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Get back to your coffee pots, old woman. Your fortune-telling days are over." He waved me away, picked up his papers, and stormed out, leaving a generous tip on the table. A final, insulting gesture. I felt a pang of something akin to my old self, a flicker of professional indignation. But it was quickly extinguished by the familiar wave of shame. Who was I to offer advice? I, who had lost everything. I had my own ghosts, my own failures. I just cleared his table, the cold coffee cup mocking my attempt at relevance. That night, I couldn't sleep. Harrison Blackwell's face, his arrogance, the undeniable truth of his financial situation, it all swirled in my head. I pulled out an old financial textbook from a dusty box in my closet, a relic from my past life, and started rereading sections on corporate restructuring, leverage, and asset management. The language, the logic, it was like breathing again. I realized I hadn't forgotten anything. My mind was still sharp, my instincts still honed. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn barely touched the Chicago skyline, the bell above Murphy's Diner chimed at 6 a.m. It was Harrison Blackwell. He looked haggard, his usually impeccable suit rumpled, his face pale. His arrogance had been replaced by a desperate, hollow look. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, looking at me, the diner still empty, save for Tommy behind the counter. "You were right," he choked out, his voice a whisper. "Every damn thing you said." I stayed up all night, had my team rerun the numbers. We're in worse shape than I thought. My company is weeks, maybe days, from collapse." He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss. "I need your help," he said, the words clearly painful for him to utter. "Please, name your terms." That was the moment. The very air around me seemed to shift. The weight of shame, the dull ache of anonymity began to lift. In that moment, I was no longer just Catherine the waitress. I was Catherine Wells, the financial consultant. "My terms are non-negotiable, Mr. Blackwell," I said, my voice regaining its old steel. "Full access to everything. All books, all records, all personnel. Full authority to make decisions, no second guessing. A substantial upfront fee, and if I save Blackwell Enterprises, a significant equity stake in the company. And one more thing, complete discretion. My past remains my past. To your board, I am an independent strategic consultant, no questions asked. He swallowed hard, a flicker of his old pride battling with his desperation. He nodded slowly. Deal, he rasped. When can you start? Now, I replied, taking off my apron, my eyes already calculating the enormity of the task ahead. My little studio apartment became my war room. I reactivated my old LLC, the one I had kept going out of habit and a faint, lingering hope. My Series 66 license, though dormant, was still active. I was legal. I was ready. The first few weeks were a blur of numbers, meetings, and relentless analysis in Harrison's lavish, yet strangely sterile office at Blackwell Tower. He had given me a small, out-of-the-way office, far from the prying eyes of the board, as per my request. James, Harrison's assistant, a young man who initially looked at me with thinly veiled skepticism, gradually began to treat me with a grudging respect as he saw the meticulous detail of my work. I surgically dismantled Harrison's ego-driven, high-profile failures, starting with that disastrous Miami real estate project. It was a black hole, sucking away millions. He had invested heavily, blinded by promises of quick returns, refusing to cut his losses. His company was hemorrhaging money. But beneath the layers of ill-advised ventures, I found Harrison's true gems, his overlooked, quietly profitable investments in tech startups, biomed research, and clean energy initiatives. These were the true heart of Blackwell Enterprises, the parts he had neglected in his pursuit of flashy, high-risk deals. These are your winners, Harrison, I told him, pointing to a spreadsheet. These are what we save. Everything else goes. He listened, surprisingly, humbling himself to my blunt assessments. As I dug deeper, not just into the company's books, but into Harrison himself, I began to see cracks in his arrogant facade. His reckless drive, his refusal to admit defeat, his almost self-destructive pursuit of ever larger deals. It wasn't just greed. It was something else, something deeper. One evening, working late in his office, I noticed a framed photograph on a corner of his desk, partially obscured by stacks of papers. It showed a vibrant woman and two bright-eyed children, all smiling, their faces full of life. It was a stark contrast to the grim, business-focused environment. My heart ached for him. I had lost my professional family. He had lost his real one. Your family? I asked softly, my voice barely a whisper. He stiffened, his eyes clouding over. My wife and two children, he said, his voice raw. Car accident, 15 years ago. He paused, taking a ragged breath. I just kept building, kept expanding. Thought if I made it big enough, if I was successful enough, it would fill the void. The truth of his grief, the devastating emptiness that fueled his frantic ambition, resonated deeply with my own recent loss. In that moment, our professional bond deepened into something more human, more understanding. We were two broken people trying to rebuild. However, not everyone at Blackwell Enterprises was receptive to my presence, let alone my drastic restructuring plan. Marcus Webb, the chairman of Blackwell Enterprises board, was my most vocal and venomous opponent. From day one, he viewed me with suspicion, a disdainful glint in his eye. He was a smooth operator, always impeccably dressed, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Every time I proposed a divestment, a strategic shift, or a move to cut losses on one of Harrison's pet projects, Webb would subtly undermine me, plant seeds of doubt in Harrison's ear, or bring up irrelevant historical data to derail the conversation. He veiled his opposition under the guise of long-term vision and protecting shareholder value, but I sensed something far more sinister at play. It wasn't just professional disagreement, it was deliberate sabotage. He wanted Blackwell Enterprises to fail, and he wanted Harrison to lose control. He seemed to relish the impending chaos, hinting at a necessary restructuring that would clearly involve him acquiring more power, if not outright ownership. His opposition to my plan, which was designed to save the company, was so vehement, so consistent, it didn't add up. Why would a chairman want his own company to collapse? My analytical mind, once dormant, began to piece together a new, terrifying picture. Webb wasn't just opposing me. He was playing a much larger, more dangerous game. As I was fighting tooth and nail to save Blackwell Enterprises, meticulously rerouting funds, negotiating with creditors, and championing the quiet winners that would form the backbone of the new company, Webb escalated his efforts. He started spreading rumors about Harrison's instability, questioning his judgment, even subtly suggesting I was a rogue consultant who was somehow in cahoots with Harrison to defraud the company. He was creating a crisis of confidence, eroding Harrison's authority, all while unaware that every single move he made was being documented, analyzed, and filed away in my mind. I had notebooks full of financial projections, but also behavioral patterns, meeting notes, and suspicious discrepancies that all pointed to Webb. I suspected he was building a case for a hostile takeover, buying up distressed shares at a discount as the company teetered on the brink. I had started to feel like I was back in a courtroom, building a case, only this time it wasn't about restitution, it was about exposing a predator. One rainy afternoon, just as I was finalizing a crucial debt restructuring proposal, two impeccably dressed individuals appeared at my office door. Agent Martinez and Agent Foster, FBI. My heart sank. Here we go again, I thought, bracing myself for another inquiry into Michael's crimes, another public shaming. But what they told me next sent a chill far colder than the Chicago wind through my veins. Ms. Wells, Agent Martinez began, we're not here about your son's past crimes, at least not directly. We're here because your son Michael has been cooperating with us. My blood ran cold. Michael cooperating? He's implicated Marcus Webb in a far-reaching corporate espionage and racketeering scheme. Agent Foster interjected, her voice sharp and to the point. They revealed that Michael's fraud, the one that had destroyed Wells and Associates, wasn't a random act of greed. It was orchestrated. Webb had targeted my company, deliberately cultivated Michael, exploiting his weaknesses, pushing him into the fraud. His goal? To destabilize Wells and Associates, create a crisis, and then acquire our assets, our client list, everything, at a fraction of its true value. Webb had used Michael as a pawn, and now he was doing the same to Harrison and Blackwell Enterprises, systematically trying to crash the company so he could sweep in and buy it cheap. They showed me a grainy photograph, Webb and Michael shaking hands in a dimly lit cafe. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It was a calculated, insidious plot, meticulously designed to dismantle lives and companies for profit. My son wasn't just a perpetrator, he was a victim of Webb's manipulation too, albeit one who still bore responsibility for his actions. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, Webb's venomous opposition, his undermining of Harrison, his subtle hints of a takeover. It all made horrifying sense. Agent Martinez looked at me, his gaze intense. We need your help, Ms. Wells. Webb has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, where he plans to push for a vote of no confidence against Harrison and force a leadership change. We believe he intends to use this as a springboard for his takeover. You're the only one who can stop him. We need you to wear a wire. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a potent mix of righteous fury and a chilling sense of purpose. This wasn't just about Harrison or Blackwell Enterprises anymore. This was about justice. This was about reclaiming my name, not just professionally, but morally. This was about exposing the true monster who had orchestrated my downfall and was attempting to do the same to another innocent party. I'll do it, I said, my voice steady, my resolve iron. The next morning, the boardroom at Blackwell Tower hummed with an almost palpable tension. Marcus Webb, radiating smug confidence, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, flanked by several board members who seemed to be in his pocket. Harrison sat opposite him, looking weary but determined. I walked in, my steps measured, a small, almost imperceptible wire taped beneath my blouse. My heart pounded a rhythm of retribution. Webb launched into his presentation, a slick, insidious argument for Harrison's incompetence, highlighting every misstep, every failed project, painting a picture of a company in irreversible decline. He then unveiled his proposal, a vote of no confidence, followed by a motion to install an interim CEO, himself, of course, and a plan to restructure Blackwell Enterprises, which I knew meant dismantling it for his own gain. He concluded with a triumphant smirk, looking around the room as if victory was already his. Therefore, he declared, I move for a vote of no confidence in Mr. Blackwell's leadership and propose a new strategic direction for Blackwell Enterprises, effective immediately. Then it was my turn. Mr. Webb, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, before the vote, I have a few questions for you regarding your proposed restructuring and your involvement in certain, shall we say, preemptive actions. He chuckled, a condescending sound. I'm not sure what relevance a consultant's questions have, Ms. Wells, but please enlighten us. I walked to the large display screen at the front of the room, pulling up a carefully constructed presentation. My questions, I stated, relate to a pattern of behavior that suggests not a desire to save this company, but to destroy it for your own personal profit. I laid out the financial discrepancies I had uncovered, the deliberate sabotaging of profitable ventures, the strategic leaking of confidential information that depressed stock prices, all traceable back to decisions Webb had subtly influenced or directly made. This isn't poor leadership, Mr. Webb, I concluded. This is a coordinated attack, a hostile takeover disguised as a rescue. Webb's face darkened. Preposterous, he roared. She's fabricating this. This woman has a history of scandal. Remember her son's fraud at Wells and Associates? Ah, yes, my son's fraud, I said, my voice chillingly calm. Agent Martinez, Agent Foster, perhaps you'd like to shed some light on that particular scandal and Mr. Webb's rather intimate involvement. The FBI agents, who had been waiting just outside the boardroom, walked in. The room erupted in gasps. Webb went pale, his smug composure crumbling. Mr. Webb, Agent Martinez stated, we have overwhelming evidence, including recorded confessions and financial records, that you orchestrated the fraud at Wells and Associates. You manipulated Michael Wells to destabilize the company, intending to acquire its assets on the cheap. We also have extensive documentation of your efforts to sabotage Blackwell Enterprises with the same goal. Then I looked directly at Webb, my voice ringing with authority. Perhaps, Mr. Webb, you'd like to explain to the board why you thought it would be a good idea to meet with my son, Michael, in secret just weeks before my company collapsed, and what promises you made him in exchange for his cooperation in your scheme to steal from our clients and ruin our firm. His eyes darted around the room, trapped. He saw the cold, hard glares of the board members, the grim determination of the FBI agents, and the unyielding gaze of the woman he thought he had destroyed. You can't prove any of this, he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. It's all circumstantial. Actually, Agent Foster interjected, holding up a small device. We have you on tape, Mr. Webb. Every word you've said, every admission you've made, right here. Your scheme is over. Webb's face drained of all color. The gavel fell, not on Harrison's future, but on Webb's. He was arrested on the spot for conspiracy, corporate espionage, and racketeering. His cries of "This is a travesty," echoing hollowly as he was led away in handcuffs. The silence that followed was deafening, but this time it was a silence of relief, of justice served. The fallout was swift and absolute. Marcus Webb's carefully constructed empire of deceit crumbled. His arrest sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Investigations revealed the full extent of his schemes, his network of shell companies, his manipulation of vulnerable individuals like my son. He faced a mountain of charges, legal and financial ruin, and the utter obliteration of his social standing. There was no coming back for him. Blackwell Enterprises, though bruised, was saved. With Webb out of the picture, and with my restructuring plan fully implemented, the company began its slow, steady climb back to profitability. Harrison, humbled and profoundly grateful, made good on his promise. He not only paid my substantial fee, but also granted me a generous equity stake, making me a significant shareholder. More importantly, he offered me a partnership, an equal role in building something new. My professional reputation, once tarnished beyond recognition, was fully restored. The story of Catherine Wells, the brilliant financial mind who went from waitress to corporate savior, became a legend in Chicago. Clients, old and new, flocked to me. I established a new firm, Wells Strategic Consulting, with Harrison as a valued partner. We moved into a sleek, modern office space, fittingly back in the Blackwell Tower, though on a different floor than my old office, a symbol of a new beginning. My client list grew quickly, with a waiting list forming. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very name that had once been synonymous with scandal was now revered for integrity and unparalleled expertise. An insurance settlement from Webb's confiscated assets even allowed for partial restitution to my original clients who had been defrauded by Michael, bringing a measure of closure to that painful chapter. My life, once defined by loss and regret, transformed into one of purpose and quiet satisfaction. I still lived in my modest studio for a while, but eventually I found a beautiful, light-filled condo overlooking Lincoln Park, a peaceful retreat where I could watch the changing seasons. The ending wasn't one of gleeful triumph, but of profound peace. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance, about reclaiming one's dignity and finding your way back to who you truly are, even after the world tries to tell you you're nobody. I finally felt whole again, not the Catherine Wells of old, but a stronger, more resilient version, forged in the fires of adversity. My days were no longer spent pouring coffee, but poring over financial statements, building, not destroying, and for the first time in a very long time, I slept soundly. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments below. To listen to the next incredible story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.